In 2025, John Boyega made headlines, not for a new role, but for calling out the very franchise that helped launch his career into hyperspace. His words were pointed. Let me tell you, Star Wars always had the vibe of being in the most whitest elite space. It's a franchise that's so white that a black person existing in it was something. You can always tell it's something when some Star Wars fans try to say, well, we had Lando Calrissian and had Samuel L. Jackson. It's like telling me how many cookie chips are in the cookie dough. It's like they just scattered that in there, bro. And he wasn't wrong. The Star Wars sequel trilogy introduced Finn, a former stormtrooper with a mysterious past, a lightsaber in hand, and a central spot in the promotional material. But by the third film, he was mostly sidelined, reduced to yelling "Rey" and running after the main plot rather than being part of it. Boyega's frustration was heard loud and clear, but it was also confusing. His criticism focused largely on the fandom's reaction to his character, calling it racist and toxic. And while parts of the fandom were undeniably hostile, what's often overlooked is that the biggest betrayal didn't come from the audience. It came from the studio. It was Lucasfilm, not the trolls on Reddit, that downgraded Finn's role. It was Disney, not the comments section, that gave us a teaser of a Jedi of color, then never followed through. And this is the pattern. Diversity gets the spotlight in trailers, the hashtags, the interviews, but not always in the story. So when people talk about representation in entertainment, it's worth asking, are these characters being included to be heard, or just to be seen? Let's talk about the creative cost of what I'd call box-check storytelling, where diversity in film isn't used to deepen stories, but to fulfill modern mandates. You've probably noticed the trend. Characters of color, especially women of color, are increasingly written with an unwavering moral compass. They're smart, principled, brave, and often flawless. Meanwhile, the straight white male character? He's either the villain, the fool, or a relic in need of redemption. Take Reva in Obi-Wan Kenobi. A fascinating premise, an ex-youngling turned inquisitor, but her arc barely wrestles with her darkness. Her rage is justified, her cruelty explained, and by the end, her redemption is swift and largely unearned. Or look at Riri Williams, another genius-level character who enters the Black Panther universe already brilliant, already brave, already positioned as the next tech savior. We're told to admire her, but rarely do we get to understand her. Contrast that with the treatment of white male leads in the same sphere. In Doctor Strange 2, Strange is told outright that in every universe, he's the problem. In The Last Jedi, Luke Skywalker is no longer the hero, he's the mistake. And in She-Hulk, Bruce Banner is sidelined while Jennifer tells him how to manage his anger. Over and over, white male characters are recast not as protagonists, but as lessons. Now, here's the thing. Diversity is not the problem. Flat characters are. In the push to course-correct for years of imbalance, Hollywood has started playing it safe. Characters of color are no longer allowed to be villains, anti-heroes, or even messy humans. They must represent. They must inspire. They must be safe. But complexity is what makes characters human. We remember Denzel Washington in Training Day, not because he was a role model, but because he was compelling. We remember Killmonger not for his nobility, but because he made us question ours. If everyone who isn't white and male is only allowed to be righteous, and every white male lead is there to be corrected, then we're not telling stories anymore. We're broadcasting lectures. In trying to correct the old stereotypes, Hollywood has built new ones. And in the process, they've traded honest storytelling for a kind of moral PR campaign. That's not representation. That's regulation dressed as progress. But amid this shift, there's a curious and very specific trend that's emerged. One that sparked a lot of conversation online, and not always for the reasons studios might have hoped. That trend? The race-swapping of ginger characters. Now, at first glance, it might seem like a coincidence. A few gingers getting a new look, reimagined for a modern audience. But after seeing Ariel, Jimmy Olsen, Mary Jane, Starfire, Annie, and even April O'Neil, all originally white redheads recast as black or biracial in recent adaptations, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. So, it begs the question, why redheads? Some speculate that redheads who make up just 1 or 2% of the global population are seen as visibly unique, enough to be memorable, but still not so culturally or politically loaded that changing them causes immediate backlash from mainstream media outlets. In short, they're distinct but disposable. It's as though studios believe that if you're going to swap a race, better to do it with a character who already stands out visually but isn't deeply tied to real-world racial identity. But for many fans, these changes aren't just aesthetic. Swapping a character's race can unintentionally alter other traits that make them who they are. Personality, cultural context, and even their struggles. all of which are often subtly tied to their original design, can be affected. These characters were created a certain way, with their look often complementing their quirks, flaws, or the role they play in the story. When that changes, even with the best intentions, something gets lost in translation. And here's where the backlash grows. For fans of the original source material, fidelity matters. When adaptations stray too far from the established identity of a character, especially without a compelling narrative reason, it can feel like a betrayal, or worse, a marketing gimmick disguised as progress. One of the most curious and ethically complicated patterns in modern casting is the strategic placement of actors of color in fantasy and sci-fi roles, where their race is either hidden, disguised, or rendered irrelevant through makeup, body paint, or CGI. Think of Dave Bautista as Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy, Zoe Saldana as Gamora, Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka, and even Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba in Wicked. These characters aren't human. They're green, blue, or entirely made of alien technology. Their racial identity isn't part of the character's narrative, but the casting of these talented actors clearly signals a commitment to diversity. It raises an interesting ethical question. Are these opportunities truly about inclusion? Or are studios simply ticking boxes, casting diverse actors in roles where their racial identity is hidden behind body paint or prosthetics? There's a subtle yet powerful commentary here about the ways we view race and identity in storytelling. By casting people of color in roles where their skin color doesn't matter, or is covered entirely, studios are avoiding the complex conversation of what it means to represent real, lived experiences of people of color in meaningful ways. It's a calculated move that often feels like an easy out. The diversity is there, but it doesn't require the story itself to truly engage with race, culture, or history. It's almost as if these roles are a way for studios to have their diversity cake and eat it too, without actually tackling the difficult questions about race in contemporary settings. By casting actors of color in these roles, studios get to meet diversity quotas. But the question arises, are these roles truly about inclusion, or are they just a convenient way to add some diversity without addressing real-world racial dynamics? Contrast this with films like Black Panther, where the race and cultural identity of the characters are central to the story. In these cases, diversity isn't a sideline, it's the heart of the narrative. So, what's the impact of casting actors of color in roles where their race isn't part of the conversation? Is this an easy win for studios, or does it allow them to sidestep the real, complex narratives that could transform how race is portrayed in film and TV? At the heart of it all, storytelling is about connection, about finding pieces of ourselves in characters, whether they're real, fictional, flawed, or fantastical. But when creative mandates dictate the terms of representation, swapping race for optics, writing for ideology over authenticity, or concealing identity for fear of scrutiny, we have to ask, is this really progress, or just performance? Have these efforts opened new doors and fostered genuine inclusivity, or have they built a facade, hollow in its impact and unsure of its purpose? Maybe it's time to reflect not just on who we cast, but why. Not just on what stories we tell, but how honestly we're telling them. So, as the credits roll, I leave you with this. In our push for progress, are we crafting stories that reflect the world as it is, or the world we wish it was, without truly doing the work to get there? Thanks for watching. If this gave you something to think about, share your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical.